Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman. Hopefully all of you are having a wonderful day and you are ready for an hour of Computer America. So today on the program, in the second part of the show, we will be doing computer and technology news, checking out all of the latest and greatest tech stories that we feel you should know about, including Apple's new rebooted MacBook Pro. Let's see, there was a VPN hack that always, kind of worrisome to hear that your security minded software is the one being compromised, and so much more. So everyone, you're going to want to stick around for the second part of the program. But you're also going to want to stick around for the first part of the program because that's when we are interviewing a company called the Basel Action Network, or BAN for short. And yeah, we're going to learn all about what they do, how they do it, and everything about e-waste, because that's something that obviously we talk about a lot about here on the show. What's new, what's different, what do you need to get? But then, other than maybe reselling a phone here or there, or, selling a laptop, we really don't talk about what happens to these products after their intended life cycle. So, we're going to have a fun conversation about that. So a couple of things before we get started, including computeramerica.com, that will have everything and anything you need for today's show. So be that a link to our guest website, any articles that we do, videos that we show, everything will be in one place. So if you're busy, if you're driving, you can head on over to our website and find it right there. And while you're there, enter the social media contest brought to you by Logitech. And of course, check out the live video feed brought to you by OWC. So with all that being said, why don't we go ahead and just get started with our guest. So again, the Basel Action Network, or BAN for short. And joining us is the Executive Director, Mr. Jim Puckett. So Jim, welcome on to Computer America. How you doing? And thanks for coming on.
Hi there. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, this is going to
get into it.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun, of course. Obviously, as I mentioned before, I think the audience of the show, more than anyone else, probably generates a good deal of e-waste as compared to anyone else. But I guess at the same time, everyone does. E-waste is ubiquitous. So talk about just BAN's beginning. Give us some background and a bit of your background. How did you find yourself working with this organization?
Sure. Well, BAN stands for the Basel Action Network, and it's a nonprofit organization, not really a company. Mm-hmm. And we were formed to work on kind of an esoteric environmental issue that became quite a lot less esoteric as time went on. But it's about the rich developed countries dumping their toxic waste on developing countries. And this became a epidemic in the 1980s when costs of disposal of hazardous waste became far more, expensive. And so people were thinking, well, what do we do with this stuff? We got to get rid of it. We're going to save money by exporting it to developing countries. And there was a whole epidemic and raft of ships moving from industrialized countries, Europe, USA, Japan, delivering cargoes of hazardous waste to developing countries. In the olden days, back when we first started working on this, 20-some years ago, mm-hmm. and at that time I was with Greenpeace, and we had a campaign on this whole issue. Back then, most of this waste was factory waste. And what happened over time is the factories learned to find ways to incinerate their waste or otherwise deal with it without having to export it. And now most of the waste that's traded across borders and is post-consumer waste. It's your waste. Your and my waste. Electronics Even old ships are dumped on the beaches of South Asia. So these are the kind of issues we work on. And the reason the name Basel is there's a convention, a treaty, which we helped create when I was back in Greenpeace with the United Nations. And this treaty now has many, many signatories to it, and almost every country in the world is part of it except the U.S. So in that treaty, they have strict rules about delivering hazardous waste across borders. And at the very minimum, you have to get consent from the receiving government if you're going to send that. And now there's a new wrinkle in the plan, and that is to have a complete prohibition. And we're about 3 countries away from that becoming a legal instrument, which is called the Basel Ban Amendment. But these are the issues we work on, and it was about in 2001 when I started learning that there may be a problem with electronic waste flowing massively from the United States to Asia. And that was when things really changed in my life, when I discovered that that was true. And we went to this part of China called Guiyu and discovered just massive volumes, mountains of e-waste that was being sent over there for really crude, dangerous, highly polluting processing.
So I guess just to get some background on why this became such a problem. I mean, obviously disposing of it properly, recycling it, tearing it down, that would obviously cost a lot of money, a lot of man hours, a lot of infrastructure that I suppose, and feel free to correct me on any of this, is a lot cheaper to do if you just put it on a cargo ship in a giant shipping container and send it over to someone who will take it for pennies rather than properly disposing of it. Why are other countries, especially developing countries, so ready to take this thing that we consider to be not just trash, but expensive to deal with trash? Why are they so eager to take this in developing countries?
Well, for the longest time, it was actually illegal to bring it into China, but it was flowing massively anyway. So the question is begged, why didn't China get tougher earlier? Right now, by the way, they've gotten very, very strict about all forms of waste coming into their country. But back then, there was a massive informal sector. There was some local corruption, so the bosses were getting paid off by having these migrant laborers come in from the poorer agricultural parts of China to work on this electronics, thousands of them. So there was some money involved that might have affected things. The government in Beijing just turned a blind eye to it. They didn't want to hear about it for the longest time, and it was very frustrating. It's much easier to control this trade from the exporting country than the importing country. China has a massive seaboard and many, many customs ports, and it was quite easy to slip things through those ports. Most of it actually went right through Hong Kong, and there's age-old smuggling routes through Hong Kong into China. And they used those routes, they used those methods. They would bribe the guards, and the material would just flow into this area called Guiyu. And why it took so long for them to move, but they have moved, and now we're seeing these global flows changing dramatically because China basically has put up a dam.
Right.
And all of that waste now is being deflected to other places like Southeast Asia and South Asia, and we're watching it. And we're able to watch it because we have developed the use of GPS trackers, which we use now to place into electronics. We take them down, we deliver them to so-called electronics recyclers in this country, and we're able to watch in real time exactly where this e-waste goes. And fascinating stories can be told by watching those e-waste streams.
Yeah, I mean, information and just knowledge of where it goes, I'm sure, is crucially important. And I'm also surprised that and I guess you mentioned this in your time at Greenpeace, but you also are tracking ship recycling. And that's something that, I would say a month ago, if we had this interview, I would say, what's wrong with recycling ships? But I was able to, just even a couple weeks ago, I watched a piece by Vice, the shipbreakers of Bangladesh, and breaking down these giant, tanker ships, cargo ships, even cruise ships sometimes. It's a very dirty, non-safe, and really just like e-waste thrust upon uneducated segments of the population. I mean, how much of what you do with BAN, how much of it is tracking the problem? How much of it is informing the public about this? I mean, what are some of your goals with everything that you're doing here?
Well, we work with a really full toolbox, whatever is going to work. And I want to get back to what you just said, and that is we're not opposed to recycling. Like any other industrial enterprise, recycling can be extremely dirty. Mm-hmm. It can be done well. It can be done in a very difficult way when things are difficult to recycle, but it can be done diligently. It can be done in a very sloppy, dangerous, polluting way. And so when you just say, oh, I'm going to recycle my computer, beware, because there are people that will say, yes, we will recycle your computer, and they'll stick it on a ship and away it will go, and out of sight, out of mind. We have been to the places. We have scads of pictures. If you go to the ban.org website, you will see in our photo gallery all the places we've been and what your electronics looks like when it gets dumped.
And just real quick, I mean, for anyone out there watching the video portion, we're actually going through your website and checking out these photos as we speak. So just want to throw that out there.
Excellent. Yeah, so there's recycling and there's recycling, and even in the world of waste management and materials management, recycling is not the ultimate. It's not the best thing you can do. Far better to not create waste, far better to reuse things, far better to have things last a really long time. But the problem we have with e-waste is that it's massively proliferating. So more and more toys, gadgets, tools are electronic. With the Internet of Things, we're going to have circuitry in almost everything, and it's going to be more and more difficult to extract that circuitry out of furniture and clothing and toys and process it properly and return it to commodity of materials. It's going to be more and more difficult. We're creating more and more electronics, believe it or not, even though things are getting smaller generally. So that's one problem. It's just proliferation of stuff, which takes resources, and people don't have good strategies right now to how to collect that, how to manage it, and how to make sure we have the longest life of those products. That's one thing. The other big issue of why e-waste is a crisis is because it's toxic waste. So right now, we're making things that have poisons in them, basically. Brominated flame retardants are one example. Heavy metals are another. Some rare earth metals are toxic. So we haven't gotten away from using toxic compounds and elements, and these are causing tremendous problems when this stuff ends up in formal sectors. And even in this country, when you're managing electronic waste, the way a real recycler that won't export it will do is they will shred it to death and then try to separate the fine particles. When you shred this material that is toxic, you're going to create toxic dust. And this is a tremendous problem even in the U.S. for the workers. So there's a lot of problems that create this e-waste crisis, and recycling is part of the life cycle, and it can be extremely dirty. So you want to make sure, if you're a consumer that cares, that you don't just say, oh, I'm going to recycle it, it's all good. You get it to a recycler that's going to do it the right way. And so we didn't have a list of those when we started working on this back in 2002, when we first exposed GUI. We told people, hold on, we're gonna find those recyclers that are agreeing to not export it and to do it the right way. And to make a long story short, that whole program has evolved into a certification, which we've created called eStewards. And the real driver behind it is we've found out the hard way that you're not going to be able to get our Congress to do what Europe has done and ban the export of this material to developing countries. So we needed a market strategy, and so we came up with a certification, and we decided to make it a one-stop shop. So not only does it care about not exporting and following the Basel Convention rules, even in a country that hasn't ratified that treaty, but it also takes care of the workers, takes care of data security, because I'm sure you talk a lot about data security issues and hacking on your show, but another really easy way to get the data, if you're a cyber criminal, is to get it from the hardware. And a lot of the recyclers are not doing a proper job, and they'll just export it, and those hard drives will end up in Hong Kong, And I've been there. I've picked up those hard drives. I've found so much data on them. So this is another concern. And we absolutely have in our eStewards program that you have a first touch destruction of all the data. So the very first thing you do is expunge all the data. So these are the kind of issues that, make for responsible recycling and unfortunately I'm here to tell you that so much of it is not. We used our GPS trackers in 2016. We released a study where we released 205 devices with trackers in them. The ones that we delivered to recyclers, 40% of those went offshore, and almost all of those were going to Asia, to substandard operations. Most of them at that time were going into this area of Hong Kong called New Territories because mainland had shut their doors, and so Hong Kong was stuck holding this stuff, and they started smashing it and disassembling it right there in that New Territories area of Hong Kong. So that was happening, and now Hong Kong is getting tough. Mainland is getting tougher, so we're seeing this waste now boomerang and go down now to Southeast Asia and Thailand and Vietnam. So the good news is we can kind of see it coming and we can stop it. And in fact, Thailand just last week banned the import of e-waste because of what they found coming in. Part of it was from our information where we told them about where our trackers were ending up. And it's a story of whack-a-mole right now, but I think we're getting ahead of the game where we're actually going to get most of the countries that are potential victims of this type of trade to put up a roadblock, and then good things will start to happen. We'll start to realize in this country, yes, we have to take care of our own waste.
Mm-hmm. And I like to think that the problem that you're trying to tackle, it's not that people are saying, why should we care? I think recycling, and especially recently, there's been a lot of talk about plastic recycling. A lot of computer and e-waste is actually part plastic. So people care about recycling. It's just like, kind of what you outlined there with your GPS trackers. The best way to recycle isn't always obvious to consumers. And even if they try to do the best thing, it's, so often it can kind of go to the lowest bidder and it can still go awry further down the chain. I guess my question is, what are some of the kind of basic steps? Because when you buy a device, maybe on the back it says, please recycle your e-waste, or, please do this. There's not really a lot of clear, easy steps that people can follow. Do you have how to recycle on your website, or do you have some tips that people can use to recycle?
Yeah, the how to recycle is easy. The hard part, we've solved that problem with our eStewards program to a large degree. The problem is spreading the word about that. So there are a lot of others that are saying, no, our standard is good. There's another certification out there called R2, which doesn't concern itself with export and other issues. It's a much more minimalist standard, but it's easier to achieve. So a lot of recyclers have that R2 standard. We don't buy that. We don't think it's sufficient to really protect the environment and human health, nor data security. So if people want to be careful, they need to go to eStewards, and we have a special website, e-stewards.org. And if you don't have an eStewards recycler in your area, Staples is delivering everything to eStewards, and they will take back most equipment. So we kind of have the list of the good guys, the recyclers that are going to do it the right way. We've figured out that we've really got to check them. So they're audited every year, but now we're not satisfied with just auditing because we've found out the hard way that some people can cheat those audits. So we now have GPS trackers routinely going through our eStewards to check that they're doing what they say they're going to do. And we have unannounced inspection program as well, where our auditors will show up and examine their books and their shipping docs and their data security operations immediately. So we're checking on these people, and so we put a lot of investment into this program. It'll only succeed if consumers, large and small, say, yeah, I want to do it the right way. I want to use eStewards. Now, with respect to reuse, the very first thing we would encourage people to do is consider repairing things themselves or finding avenues of reuse. A lot of our e-stewards will repair and refurbish, so that's obviously preferable.
We
I would really.
and sorry to cut you off there, but just in the same vein, we dedicate one show a month to Linux, but a lot of our Linux topics talk about taking maybe an old laptop that's 10 years old, and instead of maybe throwing it away, you turn it into a media center, so it now plays all the music for hosts your movies and things like that. I mean,
that's a great idea.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot of repurposing that can be done. There's a lot of communities that need equipment to bridge the digital gap, digital equity programs. We have one of those as well, where we have a great gang called the large corporations like LG, Samsung, Bank of America, Wells Fargo are in our program, and they will donate their computers, and then they go into city digital equity programs. So that's something we're trying to do with our eStewards program as well. And if you don't already know about iFixit, I'll bet you do, but that's a place where you can find amazing resources to repair your own equipment or encourage your friends to repair your old equipment.
And
it is not that difficult to do, and their manuals are amazing. So they'll really help you through it.
And I have mentioned them in passing on the show. The only time that I've ever dealt directly with them is when I've had to fix my own iPhone screens because I run them over with trucks and stuff, and it's awful. But I use them in my personal life, but I guess I never really think to mention them on the air. But yeah, they're great. I love iFixit.
Yeah, they're really good. That's the best manuals for repair you'll ever find. They do this because the manufacturers like Apple won't make these manuals. They discourage repair and they discourage longevity of products.
Well,
and they don't always help you in the design of their products, or make it very difficult to even change a battery. So these are some of the issues that we, as BAN, we're also talking to the manufacturers about design and trying to get the recyclers to talk to them also. So we really have a design loop where the recyclers are informing the product.
Yeah, and that is something that we do actually mention whenever a new iPhone comes out, a new Samsung phone, or especially mainly around phones, it's the repairability of a device. And more, and I'm sure that you are tracking this as well, more and more devices are being held together with glue instead of screws. There's a lot of molded plastic. Essentially, they're devices that are not made to be repaired and are kind of designed to be thrown away after 2 years.
Exactly.
That's
we
something
call
that
it
you're
design
against.
for the dump.
Yeah.
And at the same time, these guys are out of one side of their mouth, they're designing things that way, and then they talk about circular economy, and they don't really believe it until they have a strategy where they are not trying to sell you a new product every 5 minutes. So one of the ways to convert the capitalist model of always owning everything, and it's still going to be capitalist, very much so, but it's be of a different onus if we go to a model of leasing equipment rather than owning it. If you do that, then the seller, the manufacturer, or the leaseor, all one company, will have a huge incentive for these things to last a lot longer because they are holding the product the whole time. They will have an incentive not to make it toxic because they're going to deal with that liability at end of life. They will have an incentive to have it upgradable. And so we won't be churning through so much hardware. Right now, they like to glow in the green basket of recycling, that word. It sounds wonderful. We help make that word wonderful. The advocates for many years promoted recycling, but it isn't the ultimate. It's far better not to just churn through product and recycle it. It's far better to have something last as long as possible and then have it really easily recyclable to recover all those metals, etc., so we don't lose them. Right now, the way it works in the global path, so we're recycling about 16% of the materials in electronics. And the large reason for that is so much of this, for one reason or another, will move from developed countries to developing. So at end of life, things get swept north to south, west to east, going to Asia. Perhaps it's for good reasons. They think, well, we'll get another life out of it over there. They can be repaired very inexpensively in the marketplace, and they'll get another life out of it. Problem is, it ends up in these countries with no collection infrastructure, and where it actually ends up, this equipment, the circuitry, the circuit boards, even the plastics, finally, after maybe 2 or 3 lives, if we're lucky, it'll end up in a dump, and invariably that dump will get burned. All over the developing world, they're burning landfills, whether they're informal landfills or formal landfills. And then this stuff has another toxic phase, because when you burn computer electronics, which have brominated flame retardants in them and PVC, etc., you create dioxins and furans and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons and a whole other wave of toxicity. And moreover, you can't recover the metals. They're diffused into the environment. So this is why we have this whole flow of all this material, which is valuable and becoming increasingly valuable as things become more scarce, like copper is even going to become scarce. It's just being diffused in a way you can't remine it. You can't bring it back into the market. So this is the picture now. If you can think, we're only really moving 16% back into commodity streams. So in the amounts that we're creating, 50 million tons a year of electronics, it's a sad picture.
Yeah.
So something has to change very quickly.
Yeah, and just again, kind of hitting on plastic, but I'm sure it happens with a lot of other materials. I mean, you think that, and even yours, kind of leaches back into the environment. That's one thing, but eventually that's going to, condense into rain, fall into the water, be absorbed by the fish who grow there, and then those fish are, fished up from the Southeast Asia and shipped over to the U.S. And now you're eating copper. So like this is a problem that has so many downstream effects. I can see it.
It's really true. There's some people on this planet that really don't give a crap about people in other parts of the world. But your point you're making is, sorry, you can't run from it. The burning of this stuff over in China comes up into our upper atmosphere, comes over and rains out into our part of the world. And it's going to come back and haunt you one way or the other, either through products like you mentioned or through long-range transport of air pollutants. Right. So yeah, it's gonna get you one way or the other. Exporting is not the answer. What economists call this whole phenomenon, which has created this waste trade, is externalizing costs. You're basically not willing to pay the real price for doing things the right way. Producing a product without these externalities, you're just going to find a real easy way to find someone that else will have to bear that burden, whether they pay for it with their health or some other way. So that's what we do routinely, and this is what's happening with electronics. And in the U.S., we have very few laws to control the export. So I have a lot of EPA enforcers that would love to go after these exporters, and we have all the names of them. We publish them. And the only way they can really do it is their environmental laws are way too weak. They don't have Basel Convention ratification, so we haven't implemented those rules, is to go after them for fraud, because they're basically lying to the public. If you go to their websites, they'll say, we do everything beautifully and we never export anything. And so you can catch them for fraud, and we've been doing that. We've got like half a dozen companies that the federal government has worked with us to indict them for fraud. But this is the only tool we have, really. The environmental laws are too weak. This is why we created the e-Stewards program.
Right. And by the way, Jim, we are actually about to head off into break in about a minute. Would you mind staying over for a bit and continuing the conversation?
No problem.
Perfect. So, but yeah, but in like these last 30 seconds though, I think when we come back, we're going to talk about, some of these companies that you do partner with. You mentioned some before, and we're also going to talk about your partnership with Dell. I believe that's a, pretty new one. And also we're going to talk about, just the fact that these laws that you're mentioning that, the EPA can't follow up on, that happens so often in tech where law cannot keep up with the pace of technology, and it's unfortunate that it happens with e-waste as well. So we're gonna talk about all this and more. So everyone, you're listening to Computer America, and you are listening to we are interviewing the Basel Action Network. as we continue on here with Computer America. So right after the break, we'll come back, talk about, we'll wrap up this conversation a bit more. And I got to be honest, as dire as this is, I think we can leave you with, those warm, fuzzy feelings, because I think a lot of people are hopeful about this whole subject. But everyone, we'll be right back. More Computer America right after this. Stay tuned.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a...
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. That's 800-215-4461.
So, welcome back to the Computer America Show. It is 31 minutes past the hour, and by the way, we know that our automation messed up there a little bit. Just wanted to get it out that our, that Brother Wolf, it's a organization that we work with, brotherwolfbwar.org. Check them out; they do good stuff. But in the meantime, we are talking to another organization that's doing great things, and I don't say that lightly, because this is something, as I mentioned, we kind of tiptoe around here and there. We talk about the repairability of devices. We talk about, obviously, trying to upgrade or, get a second life out of these devices that, you don't just throw them right away. And on the show, we tiptoe around it all the time, but I think what BAN is doing, the Basel Action Network, is or the Basel Action Network is doing, is really kind of tackling this head on, as opposed to our, kind of in a roundabout way, being good technology consumers. So continuing on with us is Mr. Jim Puckett, and and he is the executive director for the organization. So Jim, as I was saying before the break, and again, thank you for continuing on. I mean, talk about some of the partners that you mentioned. You mentioned that, I believe Office Depot, you can take your, you can take your e-waste there. I'm sorry, Staples, although I think they bought each other, but whatever. But Staples, you can recycle things there. Talk about Dell and some of your other partners. Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
pretty substantially to Asia. So the stuff was being exported out of these Goodwill stores that people thought they were doing the right thing, again, giving it over to Goodwill.
Right.
So we published this in a report called Disconnect, playing off of the Reconnect program. And Dell took notice, of course, and when we started a dialogue with them, and to their credit, they said, okay, well, let's do some more tracking, and we would like to join in a partnership with you to do that. And so they've made that a major program that they're piloting this year, and they've announced it in their sustainability reports, et cetera. So Dell is working with us to check their take-back waste as well as their own internal office equipment, where it all goes. And so we're doing that right now. They have an eye on it through our methods and system and our software, the way we track materials. So that is very promising. We've also got some other companies involved in that very same type of activity, which I can't name all their names right now, but we have decided that this is a real game changer, that you can actually have what's equivalent to an audit every 24 hours, because these things will ping every 24 hours and say, here I am, here I am. So the GPS tracker is telling the user, exactly where the waste is at any point in time, and we do it every 24 hours to save battery life. And it can go for 3 years with that same battery. So we have offered this as a service, and it's a new program called EarthEye, and we have a website for it called at eartheye.org, and we're offering it to large corporations, banks, financial institutions, et cetera, that are concerned not only about the environmental liabilities, but the data security liabilities. So we've just offered that up, and so we're going to be having a lot more partners in our program, we believe, from this new added value that we're giving with this service.
So far we have ban.org, we have e-stewards.org,
stewards.org,
and eartheye.org. So we're going to include all those in the show notes and make sure people can find those easily.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I mean, this is all sounding like you're doing a lot of work, and obviously I really do think that if people just kind of know what's happening, then useful change can come from that, because so much of this, as you mentioned, there's breakdowns in the middle that are affected by, one person making one bad decision and everything goes downhill from that. So having that transparency throughout the entire process, super important. And before we say goodbye, let's go ahead and try to give some of those warm fuzzies. The first one I wanted to want you to kind of expand on was the idea of, and I hate to kind of say it because so many consumers, they're kind of tired of subscription-based models, but you seem to kind of hint that is maybe a useful alternative to the idea that you buy let's say you buy a laptop that you're going to use for 3 to 4 years and then throw away. Do you think that there's an alternative model where we don't buy trash and then buy the newest shiny thing? Is there one where we're kind of heading there with cars, where instead of owning a car, you rent cars as you need them? Yeah.
So this hasn't been. It's just been think tank material pretty much. Right. Of course, some of the office equipment is an exception, where you can lease office equipment, large printers and things like that. That's been happening for years. But with consumer electronics, not so much. As soon as this becomes prime time, and I do believe it's going to be rolled out, I know HP is really looking at it very closely, that it'll be a lease model. Watch for that, because it is a far superior way to work a market strategy for the environment, because then they don't have to sell you products every 5 minutes. So companies can actually legitimately say, we support reuse because we're the ones having to upgrade and repair and refurbish. It's our equipment. So that's a huge breakthrough. In the meantime, design is so important. We got to reward those companies that are doing greener design of products, having less toxics. And there's a program I want to alert you to, another website called EPEAT, E-P-E-A-T. I'm not sure if that's the exact URL, but you can find it under EPEAT. And that is a government program that was originally designed to inform agencies how to buy equipment that was most energy efficient and less toxic, etc. But it's a tool that anybody can use. So if you have a certain need for a laptop or whatever, you plug in the specs of your need, and they will give you the gold, silver, and bronze models that meet those requirements for the environment. Very important that we reward good design. Yeah.
And by the way, that's
anybody can use it.
Yep. And by the way, that's epeat.net, and that will take you to greenelectronicscouncil.org.
Yeah, that's the ones that are running it right now, and it's a great tool. It's a brilliant idea, and because people say, well, which are the best products to buy? And the manufacturers are very reluctant to grade themselves because they don't have, not their entire product line is green. Some of them are greener than others, and they don't want to point out the fact that some of their product line is dirty and some is much more green. So they're not the ones that are wanting to stick their necks out. You haven't seen too many people advertising computers saying we have the toxic-free computer. But you can, in fact, find that some of the models are really close to being toxic-free, for example. So this is something to explore, and it's a great tool for all consumers of electronics.
Right. So, and I think the other one is that you mentioned that you are within just a few countries short of getting like a total global ban on exporting this kind of e-waste and things like this. How much progress have you made? Are you making more progress lately? Is there more awareness and you are making strides, or I kind of wanted to end this interview on a positive note.
Yeah, well, it really is exciting because China did this very dramatic thing where they say, we don't want any more waste, you don't want any plastic waste, any kind of waste. We have enough of our own problem. This is an externalization of costs, and we want to realize the economic impact and deal with our own waste. So this has had a huge impact because America's been sending everything to China, plastics, packaging, everything. So what that has done is created havoc, of course, but now all these countries are getting threatened, they're getting victimized by the massive tsunami of waste which used to go to China, is looking for a home. And so these countries are putting up trade barriers really fast. So Vietnam has banned e-waste imports just within the last 2 months, Thailand. And I had been warning these countries that this was going to happen and they should do this, and not only ban it nationally, but to ratify the ban amendment of the Basel Convention so that that can become the law of the planet. It will become into legal force. And again, we're only 3 countries away from that happening, and I think it's very likely it could happen at the next Basel meeting, which is in April of next year. So that'll be a game changer as well. And then the fact that we're watching everybody a lot more closely, we have more due diligence and accountability, more transparency through using GPS technology. We're finally going to get things pushed from the back end up to the design stage, and we will be designing greener products. But we need the consumer's help. Buy the green products and hand them over at end of life to those recyclers that are going to do the right thing, e-stewards.
It's almost like the Internet of Things is now, your trash is now an Internet of Thing where you can track it. It is sending you data.
Exactly.
So now, so that's very cool. And I will say this, that Jim, before I let you go here in just a second, that a little bit of background on myself. I'm sure longtime listeners know this, but in school I actually took environmental science was kind of my major, and went into journalism and tech because that was a passion, but environmental science and environmental consciousness is a passion as well. And I find myself surprised that as throughout this interview, I said, wow, how much I, really appreciate what it is that you do with the Basel Action Network and everything that you are working towards. So I think a lot of people are going to hear a lot more about this because I kind of want to write an article and put this up on our website and drive as many eyes as we can to it. This is a very important cause, and I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right, and with that, I think I'll say goodbye, and looking forward to next. I believe you said next April, where you have your next meeting. And
contact us again. We'll give you an update.
Love to. So in the meantime, Jim, have a great day, and all the websites that we mentioned we'll put up in the show notes. And again, thank you for your time.
Thanks so much. Take care now.
All right, have a great one. Bye-bye. All right, and there he goes, everyone. So you can find more, of course, at ban.org, or, of course, the show notes where we'll have all of the different websites right there at your fingertips, and make it kind of simple for you. But yeah, it's something that we don't talk about often. When we do, we talk about it in a very cursory way. How to turn that old laptop into something useful, or what is the repairability of the new iPhone 10, or things such as this. But these are all front and center issues for the Basel Action Network. So hey, check that out. And as I said, you'll be hearing a lot more about that. I think it sounds like a lot of fun. So in the meantime, everyone, let's go ahead and move on over to computer and technology news. And hey, speaking of new devices, shiny new things, you can of course check out owcdigital.com. They are sponsors here of Computer America. We love them, and we hope that you check them out for maybe that new hard drive, maybe that new USB hub, that new switch. Anything you may need, they're going to have it for working professionals, and especially Apple-centric working professionals. So let's go ahead and get started with computer and technology news, brought to you by OWC. So with all of that being said, let's go ahead and get into this. So a couple of different stories here. First one that catches the eye is, of course, something new, something shiny. And this has to do with the Apple MacBook Pro refresh. So I guess the review units are out, the reviews are in, and we get to talk about, some of the different specs that are in this. And we're only going to, kind of skim through this for the important numbers. But the Apple's MacBook Pro that they mentioned, it's out. So this coming to us from Engadget, Miss Dana Wallman, and talking about, saying that the new features included an optional Core i9 processor and 4 terabytes of storage. And if you look at these things, when you think about 4 terabytes of storage, I think of a pretty hefty, 3.5 inch hard drive. And these things are super thin. I mean, MacBook Pros are always so sleek and so good looking. It's impressive that they can fit anything into these things, but here we go. As she starts off, good news, Mac fans. If you're waiting for Apple to refresh the MacBook Pro, today is your lucky day. Both the 13-inch and the 15-inch models have received some under-the-hood upgrades, along with a quieter keyboard. And they said that these new models are available today, and they start at about $1,300 for the 13-inch model, and $2,400 plus for the 15-incher. So obviously, knowing Apple, you pay for a lot, and in some cases you overpay for a lot. But with Apple, you get style that only Apple can give you. So if you're into this, you know what you're in for. So $2,400, and the 1,300, 2,400. Those are just the starting points. I'm sure if you deck these things out, they could even go up to, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 for a laptop. So, and she said that I had a chance to see them in use this week, and will also be receiving a review unit any day now. At which point, we'll be doing some performance and battery life testing, and so here we go. These are the rundowns. So obviously, the review units are being sent out, but in the meantime, we have some numbers. Saying that for the kind of people who will potentially pay $2,400 for a new laptop, it's probably best if she cuts straight to the specs. Where the 15-inch, which is the larger of the two models, with the Intel Core i7 and i9 processor, i7 or i9 processor options, with up to 4 terabytes of storage and up to 32 gigs of DDR4 memory. So not 32, not bad. I was hoping to see a little bit more memory in these things, maybe 64. 128 is not out of the question for a lot of higher end PCs. And if you're paying $2,400 for a laptop, that thing is by definition at that point higher end. So 32 gigs, pretty good. And we'll have to get into, just how fast the processors are and, if it's SSD or traditional hard drive when it comes to the memory. But in any case, the storage. But in any case, with the 13-inch model, you have a choice between the Core i5 and the i7 chips, including quad-core CPUs on the Touch Bar models. And for the 13-inch, you're maxing out at a 2 terabyte SSD, up from 1 terabyte in the previous generation. So that 4 terabyte most likely is at least an SSD storage device. So that's good. So as for graphics, the 15-inch model is once again the better performer. So obviously the 15, 13, and the 15-inch and 13-inch, the 15 is going to have the better specs across the board. So they said that it runs an AMD Radeon Pro with at least 4 gigs of VRAM, and the 13-inch model has an Intel Iris Plus 655 graphics with 128 megabytes of eDRAM. So, let's see. If neither graphic solution is enough, Apple will also be selling external GPU in its store for the first time. Well, that's interesting. It's a $700 model from the Blackmagic that featured AMD Radeon Pro, and and of course you can use that using the Thunderbolt 3 sockets. So, obviously, there's 2 Thunderbolt 3 sockets built into the laptop, 4 USB 3.0 connections, and 1 HDMI 2.0 output. So the important part there is that graphics-wise, the AMD Radeon Pro GPU is of course going to be pretty good. You can run a Radeon Pro 580 graphics card within this thing. It's pretty cool. And of course, external GPU. Let's see. I think there are some images there you can see, but in the meantime, that's probably the best you're going to get, because graphics cards are so, I don't want to say power intensive because they're working to make them more efficient generation after generation, but they generate a lot of heat. And you kind of don't want that, even in these larger, kind of notebooks where you can probably get away with it. You don't want to compromise the entire design inside and still have it overheat when you could just, kind of put in kind of a mid-range graphics processor and then have an external unit besides. And just to be clear, already we can kind of tell that if you're paying these kinds of prices for this laptop, you're not looking for the best specs for the money spent. If you're already spending $700 for an external graphics card aside a $2,400 laptop, then this thing won't compete spec-wise with a lot of the desktop replacement laptops that we talk about here. That is its own category where they're bigger, they're bulkier, they're beefier, they are quote unquote portable, but at the same time they weigh like 10 pounds or 15 pounds or something stupid like that. This doesn't compete with that. This is still supposed to be a laptop, and a laptop is going to be spec-wise inferior to a desktop because you have to pay for miniaturization, you have to pay for the design of the laptop, you have to pay for everything in between and everything to work together. So hardware-wise, you are not getting the best value. But again, it's Apple, so what are you going to do? So they said as for the keyboard, it's supposedly quieter, and though she had a few minutes playing with it in the demo, she's not ready to pass any sort of judgment. So I guess keyboards were a problem before. Who knows? Let's see. So we're going to go ahead and skip through all that and just say that she wraps up by saying that all told, this is at least the 3rd time within the past year that Apple has seemingly taken pains to prove it hasn't forgotten about its more demanding customers. And of course, there was the iMac Pro launch back in the fall, where Apple gathered a group of app developers before reporters to show that they were using Apple's latest professional-grade desktop. And then there were Apple's education-themed iPad events, and that was seemingly to address other teachers who hadn't yet decided if they want Apple or Google-powered classrooms. So, with all that being said, the Apple MacBook Pro refresh, if nothing else, looks like they are adding some of the newer technology, such as the i9, into it. And they're taking some, I don't want to say risks, but they are taking some deviations, such as the external GPU for the first time in an Apple computer, which, hey, super plausible with the Thunderbolt 3.0 interface. Plenty of bandwidth to get any kind of graphics that you want out of it. So, all right, there's that one. No real time to really get into some of these other ones. Let's go ahead and talk about. Let's talk about Walmart. It's pretty cool. And by pretty cool, I mean pretty invasive. So this is coming to us from Splinter, splinternews.com. You can check them out. But yeah, Walmart patents audio surveillance tool to monitor employee conversations. So, hey, because if you can't get machines in there yet, the most you could do is at least make your employees work as if they were machines. So, saying that retail colossus Walmart just patented a new technology meant to monitor employee productivity via audio surveillance of checkout counters. The technology, which Walmart calls listening to the front end, aims to increase employee efficiency by using sensors to monitor sounds that can indicate how long lines are, how many bags are being used, and most unnervingly, conversations among employees between employees and customers. So, yeah, it's essentially video was already being taken everywhere within Walmart. Video is video is video. I think we all kind of accept that when we go into Walmart, every inch of that store is being videotaped. Now we're getting the audio of it and just how it can be used. And looks like through some machine learning, some witchcraft, some wizardry, they are able to not just talk, not just kind of put a boom mic next to employees, but actually be able to listen to, again, things like efficiency and productivity. And I don't know if that's a great thing, but hey, I don't think anyone ever said that Walmart was the best employer in the world. But I digress. Saying that unlike competitor Amazon, Walmart has the burden of physical retail stores, which cost more money than Amazon's largely automated warehouses and delivery systems. So it's unsurprising that they're looking to squeeze more productivity out of their workers as much as possible. And right now, this is just a patent, and it's unknown whether Walmart will ever develop it. And that's something to, of course, make very clear as well, is that we often see patents being filed that have almost zero chance of actually becoming useful products. One of the, more interesting ones was the fact that, just to give you an example, there was a patent for plain seat design. So you know how people are generally kind of shaped in the manner that their shoulders are wider than their feet. Well, planes had, and it was probably like Delta or one of these other airlines, they were looking for ways to maximize people sitting in their planes and maximize that space so that they could squeeze another seat into it. So one patent that they actually filed, and it was picked up on, reported on, and odds are will never, ever, ever become a thing, is the fact that they were trying to seat people so that they were facing one another to a sense. So you'd be sitting next to someone facing the other way, and then, so they would be able to fit 4 people to a row instead of 3 people. Again, patents, they're filed all the time. Doesn't mean they're going to be used. Just saying that, hey, we're thinking about this. Let's get it on the record. So, we'll see what happens with Walmart. This one doesn't seem that far-fetched, and I'm betting something that's probably going to happen there. But in the meantime, everyone, I just want to say thank you for tuning in. Thank you for our guest, the Basel Action Network, and everyone, be sure to check out the show notes for all of those crucial websites. In the meantime, everyone, have a great day. Thank you so much. Be sure to catch us here Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern, as we bring you new content, new shows, and Hey, also be sure to check us out on podcast if you can't listen to us live on IRN, wherever podcasts are heard, be that iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Blog Talk Radio, any of them, folks, feel free. In the meantime, have a great one, and yeah, looking forward to it. Bye, everyone.